Hey guys, we're back with part 2 of Arena Showcase covering WWF and or WWE Survivor Series. In part 1, we ended at 2007, so it feels like 2008 might be a good place to pick things back up. Let's check it out. The 22nd annual WWE Survivor Series would come to us from Boston, Massachusetts at the TD Garden on November 23, 2008, with an attendance just shy of 12,500. The tagline, "Spoilin' for a fight." We get a brand spanking new logo here, and spoiler alert, they'll be sticking with this one for a while. This blue and gray color scheme would be seen across the graphics package, incorporating hints of white. Lower thirds for commentary are small and simple, located center screen, while wrestlers get this rather large design, complete with spikes and loops and holes. Oh my. Backstage segments take place in front of blue curtains with LED panel strips and the teeniest little monitor. How cute. This is another rather large entry area, extremely common now by this point, with a big Titantron over the point of entry and this large tower-like structure on the side. There are lots of LED panels everywhere, which make up most of the design, but we do see a few classic props here like these V letters, which help to spell out the event naming when mixed with the graphics of the LEDs, but during entrances they just look really strange and out of place. And while this isn't my favorite time for set designs, I did always sort of like these lights around the Titantron during this era. They sort of remind me of like vintage neon lights. New Survivor Series aprons here on the hardcam side with these new WWE.com ring aprons, in addition to ring steps appearing all chromed out after years of being black. Ring posts are also now silver. Ring ropes here are blue, and for some reason, Chris Jericho is vanishing before our very eyes. 12,500 fans would hit the Verizon Center in DC for the 2009 Survivor Series on November 22nd. We get the same logo as last year, right down to the blue and gray color scheme. The rest of the on-screen visuals are very similar, including the replay screen with just some slight variations. Matchup screens, oddly enough, don't feature names, but otherwise appear pretty clean. And lower thirds are the same as last year for both the commentary team and wrestlers. The backstage interview area is the same setup as well. And the entry area is also largely the same as the previous event, with small little changes like the angle of the strip lighting around the Titantron, the removal of the WWE logo at the top, and, well, yeah, that's about it. Can you spot the only difference at the ring for 2009? If you said it was these WWE logos on the barriers, you'd be correct because everything else returns here from 2008. The American Airlines Arena in Miami, Florida would host the 24th annual Survivor Series in 2010 on November 21st with an attendance of 18,000. While the opening sequence is similar to last year's, we do see a brand new color scheme. It's gold, baby. Would you believe me if I told you they kept the graphics for the show the same and just kind of changed the color? Because they did. Well, to be fair, they did change the borders and background on the replay screen and removed the word replay for some reason. And matchup screens are slightly different as well, so basically I just kind of lied, they did change. But lower thirds and such, they're the same. The backstage atmosphere feels a bit more raw here with the metallic structures in goldish hue. I do like this one. The stage is the same setup as last year, though they did add a bit more when it comes to LED panels back here around the tower area. Other than that, it's very much the same. And as silly as this sounds, this was something that really turned me off from ordering pay-per-view events during this time. I wanted to see brand new, creative set pieces. Despite the gold color scheme this year, the ring ropes and aprons still appear blue, and the only real change here would be the barriers now bearing the WWE HD branding. Well, I guess you could also count the Raw GM booth sitting here by the commentary tables as new. That's a thing I really didn't want to relive. Madison Square Garden would host another event in the series for 2011, taking place on November 20th, with 16,749 fans in attendance. The tagline would be, "The most charismatic tag team of all time. Never before. Never again." We see a new opening package, and while the event logo is pretty much the same in terms of design, it is presented this year in all white. Red accents would accompany much of the graphics here, such as these really nice matchup screens. Replays feature this dark gray background, which looks really nice behind the pop of red. Lower thirds are once again pretty large, with lots of red behind white font for names, and the event logo to the left. At first glance, I thought the lower thirds for commentary was actually the top of the table here. This year, we see a much more symmetrical entry area with a second tower structure added to the right side, and the Titantron now centered. We also see more LED at the top of the design with high-res image capability on the towers. Since this set is not elevated as the last few have been, we don't see any LED features on or around the floor area. We see a new set of aprons down at the ring for 2011, now featuring event-specific branding on all 4 sides, something the promotion hadn't done since the mid-90s at this point. Ring posts are red to match the aprons, and ropes appear white here. I'm not a huge fan of designs during this era, but I'll give credit where it's due. This one actually looks really good. In 2012, Indianapolis, Indiana would host the 26th annual Survivor Series on November 18th, with a pretty small attendance for such a big event, only 8,500. I think it's important to note, though, that the event was originally scheduled to be held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but was relocated with short notice. We see a much darker, grittier opening sequence here, ending in this mostly monochrome logo with just a few little pops of red. Oddly enough, many of the graphical screens for the night appear with this blue color scheme, including replays. This is carried over to lower thirds as well, where things have been dialed back a bit when compared to the previous years. This entry is quite massive, with most of its size coming from LED panels lining all the way up and down on both sides of the Titantron. These LED stages have never been my favorite, but I can always appreciate when they utilize classic design elements like the Survivor Series signage up top here. It does look rather good from certain angles though, where the LED has been toned down a bit. Also, I was able to capture this really cool shot of the opening pyro where the LEDs have been cut off and the pyro is giving off just enough light to see the structure from a perspective we don't normally see, and call me crazy, but I like it better like this. Over at the ring, we see the Survivor Series aprons from last year with brand new WWE.com aprons for the sides. Posts now match the ropes, appearing in white. Not gonna lie, I already missed those red posts. 13,500 would hit the TD Garden as the Survivor Series would return to Boston for 2013 on November 24th. Now, I don't typically cover buy rates, but with 179,000 here for this event, it comes in at the worst-selling Survivor Series on pay-per-view since its inception at this point. We see a new theming to the Open with a new color scheme used for the event logo, and even this sort of weathered stone look applied to it. Graphics here are clean as a whistle, if whistles were orange and yellow and stuff like that. Matchup screens have this really cool artistic look to them, while replay screens are a bit on the darker, slightly grittier side. At first glance, I assumed these lines were just a generic portion of the lower thirds, but once I checked them out for wrestlers, I realized they were ring ropes. I actually really like this design, it's something different. Legends get their own design, which is a very bare-bones version of the others. The entry area is very close to 2012's, not much has changed here. We see Survivor Series branded aprons here with the current color scheme incorporated, and these absolutely huge WWE.com side aprons. Obviously the aprons aren't huge, but the logos themselves, they're just massive. Lots of white here again, appearing for posts and ropes. Barriers are also logo free here this year for a change. St. Louis, Missouri would be the home of the 2014 series on November 23rd, with 12,000 fans hitting the Scottrade Center. This is the first event in the series to feature that brand new redesigned WWE logo, which appears here in the show opening. This year's graphical theming features this live event design with stuff like lights and marquees and other live event stuff. We see this for replays with the WWE Fan Central at Kmart branding. Funny to think that just 10 years ago, Kmart was still pushing pretty hard with promotions, and as of today, there are a reported 12 locations remaining in the United States. These lower thirds feature the same glowing yellow effect for names that we see for the event logo, with this sort of techie style backdrop. I don't really know what to call it, but it does look nice here. This stage design was used frequently during this era and sort of reminds me of the set that was used when WWE first went HD back in 2008. It's sort of uninspired, if you ask me. It's basically screens on top of screens with lights and little space between anything. They did add a large WWE logo on the stage, which is a nice touch, I'll give them that. I tend to prefer darker sets, which lend a little more to the imagination, so I did like this design during Sting's debut when almost everything was off. Let's go on down to the ring where we see these new aprons, and while I can appreciate that they tried to duplicate the glow effect here that we see in the opening, it does look sort of like one of RVD's airbrushed singlets. I guess that's not a bad thing though. We see the brand new WWE logo here on the turnbuckle pads. And fresh for 2014, with the launch of the WWE Network, we see the side aprons donning said branding. The rest of the design remains the same. November 22nd, 2015 would see the Survivor Series take to the Phillips Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, with nearly 15,000 fans attending the event in WCW's old stomping ground. There is no greater Survivor. Same opening as last year with a new sponsor, Rolaids. Advanced, that is. And same logo. This will be a reoccurring theme here, the theme reoccurring, that is, because we see the same replay screen with Rolaids and the same lower thirds for commentary, as well as the sports entertainers. Backstage segments take place here, which is much like the designs we've seen in previous years. Got a monitor with a logo, a curtain backdrop with top-down lighting, and metallic things thrown in for good measure. The entry area has not changed from last year, so if you liked that one, hooray! If you weren't a fan, well, my apologies. The ring area is much of the same as well. We see the WWE Network aprons on the sides, with last year's apron returning on the rear of the ring. But new for 2015 is the LED panel hanging over the front side of the ring. This allows for custom graphics to be displayed during both matches and entrances. And I nearly forgot how grainy these were when they first debuted. Compare this to what they have now, and it's really night and day. No other changes to report here, so we will move it right along. The 30th annual Survivor Series would hit the Air Canada Centre on November 20th, 2016 in Toronto, Canada, with 17,143 fans. Fantasy warfare just got real. That's the tagline, by the way. For the third year in a row, we'd see this opening package and logo, but this time we'd get a sponsorship tag team in Mattel and Hulu. Elsewhere, these graphics are the same. This screen hasn't changed, and neither have the lower thirds. But we do see change at the stage because nearly everything is new, and gone is the Titantron. In its place is this long curved screen, and I guess it's still sort of a Titantron, but it no longer plays Titantron videos, which were still being used the previous year. The lower portion of this design features that offset curved point of entry, a design that's been implemented in one way or another for a few years by this point. And they've toned down the usage of screens here, cutting down on the size quite a bit. Another new feature here would be the stage and ramp floors now having the ability to display video and other graphics, which they definitely made a point of pointing out. At the ring, we still see the traditional aprons on the sides of the commentary tables and opposite the hard cam, with LED panels facing the hard cam and facing the entrance area. In addition, the ring posts now have these housings around them, which allow for LED panels to be used here as well. It sort of reminds me of the time that WCW had the Slim Jim paddings wrapped around the posts at Halloween Havoc 97. The ropes appear white, that is except for the cruiserweight matches where ropes were changed to purple. And I remember attending a pay-per-view event during this time and got to see them wrap and unwrap those ropes with the purple in between matches, and let me say, this WWE crew, they're one well-oiled machine. For 2017, WWE would take to the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas on November 19th. 14,448 fans would attend the event. The graphics package is the same as we've seen it now for the last few years, but with this new red, white, and blue color scheme that extends over to the logo. This would result in many of the same on-screen graphics, with the only change being the new colors. This includes lower thirds, which now appear in either red or blue, depending on the brand each wrestler represents. And I feel like they could have fit at least one more commentator here. Come on. This would also mark the start of these weird on-screen graphics that try to look like they're part of the arena, which I know I can't be alone in thinking that these are pretty cringe, especially in more recent years. But they did decide to ditch pyro here at their live events by this point, and that money, I guess, had to go somewhere. They did get a wider monitor for backstage segments, so A+ for that. And it still features this curtain backdrop with red and blue lighting. This is another stage design that was heavily reused during this time, taking elements from both Raw and SmackDown sets and blending them together. This one can appear quite tame during matches and segments, yet loud, immersive, and dare I say, even obnoxious during entrances. Not that that's a bad thing. Heading down the aisle to the ring, we see the LED boards return here to this side, as well as the hardcam side, but traditional aprons are seen on the other two sides. LEDs return for the ring posts as well, with the non-LED portions appearing more colorful this time around. The Staples Center in Los Angeles, California would host the 2018 Survivor Series on November 18th with 16,320 fans attending. The tagline, Raw vs. SmackDown. And it just sounds backwards to me after years of playing wrestling games. We see a fresh new opening here, though the logo and color scheme remain unchanged. Graphics displaying the city and venue are now presented like this. Love it or hate it, it's a thing. Matchup screens look pretty incredible, highlighting brand association by color, clean, thin white font for names, and just enough background to not be too much. Meanwhile, the backstage interview set is very much like what we've seen in years past. All new lower thirds for the first time in a while, featuring a simple centered design, once again highlighting either red or blue based on the show each wrestler represents. Not much new to see here, and by not much, I mean there's nothing new to see here. Taking a look around the ring, we see that nothing has changed here either, though it looks like the LED panels used for the ring posts might have been upgraded or something. They appear slightly different than last year. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. November 24th, 2019 would mark the 33rd annual Survivor Series from the Allstate Arena in Rosemont, Illinois. 13,271 fans would witness this one live. The opening would give us the same design as last year, only the logo now appears in all white, with red, blue, and yellow being featured in the background. The addition of yellow representing the inclusion of NXT to the event. We see this thing again hovering around the arena. We see replay screens, the bones of which have not changed for many years now, and once again, some really magnificent looking matchup screens. But they would really amp up the strange graphical effects here, like adding this artificial ceiling and all sorts of logos and designs just sort of hovering in certain shots. But pyro has returned, which is always a good thing. Wrestling should always have pyro. Lower thirds look just like last year's right down to the design, and with the colors based on brands, now featuring yellow for NXT. And heading to the entry area, we see an all-new design here. It's got a lot of the same footprint as the last one, centered video screens, centered point of entry, and lights and screens up and down and all around. And I'm not gonna lie, it sort of looks like the proper evolution for those classic WWE designs from the early 2000s. Down at the ring, it's really the same now for a few years. These new aprons appear on the two far sides of the ring with LEDs on the opposites. White ropes inside, LEDs covering the posts. We had to get to it eventually, the one that will most likely go down as the most bizarre Survivor Series event in history, from a presentation standpoint at least. 0 fans in attendance, as this one would take place at the WWE Thunderdome at Amway Center in Orlando, Florida, on November 22nd, 2020. Brought to us by Cyberpunk 2077. We'd see a new opening with the red, white, and blue color scheme returning. This would also carry the subtitle of Best of the Best. This very interesting piece here starts things off with brand new designs for replays and, of course, more of this stuff going on. Lower thirds are the same for wrestlers and commentary and feature this rather busy design with names appearing in the middle in white. Now, the first thing you'll probably notice is the digital audience. Fans would watch from home on camera and be broadcast into the arena by way of screens placed in the stands. This looks pretty silly most of the time, but can lead to some pretty cool effects for entrances, being as the stands are filled with screens. Something else that I found really unique is the use of different pyro elements in the stands, which has never really been done before because, well, we can't really risk setting fans on fire. But here, it just looks pretty surreal. The entry area is the same as last year, and I don't know that we really expected anything different, especially given the circumstances. They did add a few more lights though, I think as maybe an attempt to draw more attention to the stage. I don't know, that's purely speculation. We also see projection screens, LED panels, and lights way up above the ring, and by God, look at those lights, they're everywhere. It's actually quite spectacular looking. Down at the ring though, pretty much just new aprons with everything else returning as we saw it last year. We're in Brooklyn, New York at the Barclays Center on November 21st, 2021 for the 35th annual Survivor Series. 15,120 fans would attend this one. Very similar opening when compared to 2020, only we don't see the best of the best included here. We get another one of these graphics displaying the city, while replay screens return unchanged from last year. Except for the red Notice sponsorship. I had to look that one up because I didn't know what it was, and apparently it's a movie with The Rock in it. Matchups are no longer displayed full screen, but instead are incorporated into live shots like so. This hurts my soul a little bit because, well, I fear change. Lower thirds are the same as last time, and I keep thinking this is a UFO in the center here. And you know what? I just don't even know what to say here with this stuff. What is this? Also, gotta give a random shout out to this dude here for this absolutely incredible Outsiders jacket. Over at the entry area, it's essentially just one solid giant screen at this point. There are lighting structures on the sides and above and whatnot, but the different portions that we'd seen previously that help to add depth and dimension are now gone. I can say that the clarity has improved greatly over the past few years, so even if it's not your cup of tea, you can't say that it isn't at least clean and crisp. I could have sworn that we've seen these aprons already, but after looking back, it appears that while they do look like some of the ones that were used previously, they're slightly different. The rest of the ring area is once again unchanged. The Survivor Series just loves them some Boston because once again the event would return to the TD Garden on November 26, 2022. I can't even keep track of how many times that is now. 15,609 people would be in attendance. We don't see a traditional logo opening here in terms of what we've seen in years past. Instead, it jumps from the hype package straight into a live shot with the logo and sponsor down here, kind of small. We did see the logo change slightly here with the addition of the War Games match added to this year's event. We see this giant graphic for the city, which is kind of cool because these have typically appeared pretty small in the past. Matchups are once again displayed over live shots, though much larger this time around. These replay screens have retained the same basic layout now for many years, with only stuff like borders and backgrounds changing to make them unique to the theming. And really, it's a super solid design, so I can see why they kept with it. And I love the War Games official rules screen here. It reminds me back when the Elimination Chamber debuted and they used something similar. And of course, we see more of this goofy stuff. I apologize to anybody that may like these. It just to me makes the product look slightly cheap. That's just my opinion. Lower thirds for commentary are red and blue with camo thrown in for good measure, but we also see other variations like blue for SmackDown, titles for champions, and completely customized numbers like this purple smoke for Judgment Day, and these golden clouds for Bobby Lashley. We see the giant screen setup return here, nothing special really, but what happened to the floor screens that they were using? They just sort of disappeared last year for 2021, and they didn't return here either. But I will say that this glossy black floor looks really good as it reflects the lights and videos. And I'll always give credit where credit is due. This thing looks pretty epic with the right lighting and the screen turned off. But I'm of the simplistic approach, so take that with a grain of salt. The obvious change here this year is, well, there's 2 rings here, but we would also see the barriers facing the hard cam now doubling as video walls. Something that you just knew was coming at one point or another. I feel like maybe the ring canvas is next, if only they could figure out how to take bumps on it without damaging it. And I'm guessing this is due to the giant cage that will eclipse the rings during the War Games match, but they opted not to feature any video-capable surfaces on the rings themselves. Not on the aprons, nor the ring posts, it's back to basics here. Inside, it's still white ropes and WWE branded turnbuckle pads. The last stop on our journey here today will be the most recent Survivor Series, as of the creation of this video, of course, and that would take place on November 25th, 2023. 17,138 fans would hit the Allstate Arena, as the event would once again return to Rosemont, Illinois. Same War Games logo as last year with a fresh new opening. We see more of this War Games camo theming used for the graphics, from the matchup screens to the returning replay screens. And why not add in a silly screen invading Slim Jim graphic? I'm sure they paid good money for that. Same lower thirds for commentary, which I might add look great. A nice product placement. Similar designs for wrestlers, though we do see more of the personalized ones as well, like this one here for Zoe Stark and Dragon Lee. I know I'm not often a huge fan of newer stuff, but I do like the idea of personalized lower thirds, and actually I'd wish they'd have them for every wrestler, personally. The stage area here sort of reminds me of the old 90s New Japan Pro Wrestling setups with the shorter but wider sets and super long ramps. This one, of course, is pretty much all screen though, and while it's not really my favorite, I do like the way it looks with certain entrance videos, and this recessed point of entry is kind of cool. It sort of reminds me of the Madison Square Garden walkway. Plus, from a fan standpoint, I think it'd be pretty cool to have one of these seats right here behind the set, getting blasted with pyro and yelling out hateful things about wrestlers' mamas. And I wish there were more to report down here at the ring area, but it's the same aprons, the same posts, even the same barriers, steps, and ropes. But my oh my, do I love me that double cage. And if you made it to the end of this video, you sure are a trooper. I feel like I'm like 80 years old saying something like that, but seriously, this was a long video. What was your favorite out of the entire bunch? If you haven't seen part 1, don't forget to go and check that out. And please, don't forget to like the video, and of course, subscribe. If you have a wrestling event you want me to do next for Arena Showcase, let me know in the comments section below. Please check out the others. I might have done the one you want to see already. Until next time, I do thank you all for watching. See you next time.